Hello, everyone. Welcome to the H panel. The H panel has been a weekly show on Unity Media, but we couldn't continue with that for the past couple of months because of travel, scheduling issues, and other matters. We hope to resume it today and continue weekly basis. And we have been receiving feedbacks and questions why the H panel is not continuing. So now we know it was because of travels and other issues. So today we are back with Ethiopia, peace, war, and everything in between highlights. So I'm joined by the panelists that you know very well, Miguel Gabisa and Faisal Robla today, and other topic is chosen purposely to cover highlights and overview what happened in terms of what stands out for both panelists. Miguel, Faisal, welcome back again. Great to see you
Thank
back.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. So we will start actually almost the whole hour will be spent on highlights for both of you. So we can start. Faisal, what has been the highlight? I'm not talking about 7 days now. So major events happening everywhere in terms of peace, war, and other issues.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Getachew, and welcome back, my colleague. I think in the last 4 years, we can say that Ethiopia has been submerged in both war and peace, and war for the fact that both Tigray and Oromo or Oromia have been really plunged into a very serious war. With the case of Tigray, we are now settled with 1 million people being killed, the largest scale of rape internationally. Probably I listened to your yesterday's presentation on the heritage of Tigray, and I think one of the professors that you invited said that after the Ahmed Gurey invasion of northern Ethiopia, which some people call it a large scale genocide. This is, he said, after 500 years, probably the most recognizable genocide in northern Ethiopia and Tigray. I think there are very, very, very few people who would argue against that. Semantics is one thing, whether this is a genocide or, you know, you know, other thing, but I think massive, massive destruction and killing of people and economic downfall has come to Tigray. With Oromia also less recognized, but definitely a very serious war. Having said that, and war being really, what we have, there is always that interrelationship between war and peace. Actually, war and peace seem to be the twin sides of one coin. With those wars, we have now two peace processes that are going. I think we will go in depth. One is the almost now concluded peace deal on Tigray, the Pretoria deal, which is at the implementation level at this point in time. Probably here and there some issues to be raised, and then the other one is the just beginning peace process pertaining to Oromia. About a week ago, I was at the Omni uh, program on Sunday, and basically, my hunch at that time, given the participants from the Oromo side, I put some issues on the table that I thought would not be, neglected, particularly by the Oromo negotiators, Dr. Mohammed Hassan and Taha. One, they will not walk away from the long-standing concept of Oromo self-determination and Oromo political well-being. I think that came out as a result of what we know so far. There are some issues being discussed. I think Scale probably will go in depth if he wants that. But some of the things that I touched that time is that some of the issues that will come to the surface would be how to bring power sharing between the existing Oromia state and leadership vis-a-vis if peace works, the the Ola and other Oromo groups. I think I recognized the difference between the Tigray piece and this one in Oromia. In Tigray, you already an existing one single entity in Tigray that was ruling the region, and there was no other Tigray force, so to speak, that was really trying to either compete with the sitting administration in Tigray. Whereas in Oromia, you have a sitting administration, you have a competing other powerful force that speaks to the issues of the masses of Oromia. And I think how to bring those two groups would be a big issue. And then the other issues that surfaced from what we understand is the issue of Finfinne. Some people call it Addis Ababa. Those are very legitimate issues. I don't take those issues lightly. I think the Oromos do have the right to table the issue of Finfinne, because the negotiations that we are dealing with are not simply a momentary kind of issues or a spur of the moment. We should address both historical, political, cultural, and sociological issues that have been there if we want to go into a sustainable peace. And later on, probably I'll touch the peace process and what are the challenges and what are the opportunities that involve in peace process. But just as a highlight of the two peace processes that we have, one is at the implementation level and the other one is just beginning, and we will see what comes out of that.
Great. Thank you, Faisal, for that opening segment. Iskel, I was showing on the screen. So you're also talking about the highlights, but John Jackson is asking in terms of any hopes for transitional government in Oromia, and you can address it on this segment or maybe later as well. Iskel?
Yeah, I mean, just to follow up on what my colleague Faisal was saying about two peace processes. Um, I guess these are basically discussions, negotiations to stop um, bullets from flying. They call it the guns. Basically, what happened in Tigray is to silence the guns. But keep in mind that in Tigray, in the case of Tigray, there was a siege. There was a siege that had been in place for nearly 800 days. So more than flying, half of the people that died in Tigray died as a result of the siege. So there was a pressure on Tigray. On the other hand, the war in Tigray was, especially the last one that started on August 24. That war was the Ethiopian and Eritrean government decided that they didn't care one bit how many people died, but they were just letting waves of human beings come at the Tigray Defense Forces. And after a while, the TDF, those are human beings. They get tired of killing. It's not just a war, but killing fellow Ethiopians became a burdensome project for Tigray. So pressure combined to create Pretoria, and the breakthrough in Pretoria followed by Nairobi. The OLA PP, or Prosperity Party government, the negotiations started and ended without a conclusion. It took 7 days, I think a little bit more than 7 days, to discuss, because that's what now it's not even negotiations. They say the way the verb that they use to describe what happened in Zanzibar is that they had discussions. Probably discussions on the process design, what kind of peace process, the modalities, the code of conduct, the role of third parties, who the third parties are, what their roles are. Were they going to be negotiators? Are they going to be middlemen? Are they going to be errand runners? their role has not been was not defined, even though we know that there was Kenya and Norway who were the go-between. The role of other third party who could have helped with logistics and finance and other things to support, like the United States and the EU, they're not even their role has not been even isolated, much less defined. So for 7 days they had this discussion on process. That at the end there was no ceasefire, there was no cessation of hostilities, and there was no political settlement. There was a gag order on both sides. They agreed to a gag order. Both sides were not speaking. Both sides were not saying anything to their own constituencies, even though we know on the part of the government, an army of social media trolls or social media outlets had been peddling stories about what happened in Tanzania, in Zanzibar. So there wasn't a bit. So we don't know much about what happened there, but we can guess. From my perspective, in this peace process, if this was a peace process, which I don't think it was from the very beginning, there was a wide chasm, a gap between the positions of the two parties. The OLA, the Oromo Liberation Army, is for self-determination. That's why they are fighting for. It is a constitutional right that they are fighting for this self-determination. This has been the foundation of Oromo demands, Oromo Liberation Front's demand, that right of self-determination of the Oromo people cannot be infringed, it cannot be, it's not derogable, it cannot be abridged. That means that's not subject for negotiations. So when Faisal says that he implored his friend, well, yes, that's absolutely important, but that was not something to be negotiated. It's about the right of the Oromo people or any other people in Ethiopia to exercise their right to self-determination, which is a right that is enshrined in the Ethiopian constitution. If there was any question about that, if there any doubt about that, the outcome, the fact that the negotiations or the discussion did not reach in any, did not conclude in any agreement, shows that this is not the subject for negotiation. It's not about to have the right of self-determination or exercise that right. It's about when. So on the one hand, you have the OLA, which is asking for the age-old demand of the right of the Oromo people for self-determination. On the other side, the Prosperity Party, especially the Oromo part of it, and which is really in power, is insisting that that the party is the answer for the Oromo people. That's the position of the that they're saying. The fact that there is an ostensibly Oromo prime minister is cited the Oromo people's right to self-determination. So there was a gap in the conception of what self-determination is. It could not be bridged. That is, so the PP is insisting on leading that it is leading the country and accusing the OLA of subverting any program of development and economic growth. So there was that gap on this issue of self-determination or not. Second, the OLA cannot trust the Prosperity Party to live up to its own promises, let alone respect an agreement that it entered into. The Prosperity Party wants the OLA to disarm and surrender. They went to Tanzania simply to accept the surrender, the capitulation of the OLA, to negotiate anything. But there is absolutely no trust between the two. Thirdly, the OLA wants to be a part of a transitional government to ensure successful democratization, if anything, in Oromia. The ruling party, the Prosperity Party, believes that it is in power and its power is uncontestable. It is not subject to negotiations. People who understand the Oromo language could understand what the Prosperity Party was standing for when the Prime Minister traveled to Nakamte and talked about or stated position that they are going to be in power for 3 years, and the OLA or anybody else, they can come into the country, engage in peaceful political contest, as if the OLA's founding party, the OLF itself, the highest high position leaders are not in prison. So that was another gap between the two, that there's the transitional government and the government that is absolutely unwilling to negotiate anything about sharing power. The OLA seems have gone into the discussion to not repeat what was done with the first the Pretoria Agreement. That is, in the case of the Pretoria Agreement, they agreed on cessation of hostilities. They wanted to silence the gun, and humanitarian aid to flow. They did not address the political problems that actually started the war. They did not get to a political settlement. They did not even get to a discussion of political settlement that was set aside for another day. Or the OLA, from what I understand, they went into the discussion to discuss political cessation of hostilities. So the PP wants fire and leave the political settlement, as was the case in Tigray, for another day. So there was a chasm, there was a big gap between the two positions. So it seems that Tanzania, or the prospect of success, was not to be obtained because it was really dead before its evidence. So the slaughter continues today, the bloodletting continues today, and the civil war continues today. As long as there is no peace everywhere in Ethiopia, it is impossible to pronounce that some part is in and the other part of Ethiopia is not. So the bloodletting and the slaughter continues in Ethiopia.
Well, I think, thank you, Skell, for that. We'll come back to the details. For example, other Oromo political parties like the OFC were also asking for, taking part in this kind of negotiation. So it's interesting you mentioned about how the Tigray and, or the, as they call it, the TPLF and Ethiopia government negotiations started from not talking about political dialogue, but the other way around, where are the OLA and the Ethiopian government on the other side, the other one. So one thing that happened the last few days is when the Prime Minister talks about, again, law enforcement operation in Amhara region, he didn't explicitly say that, but he alluded to the fact that there are external non-Ethiopian forces who are trying to interfere, and he gave a public warning that. So maybe you can talk about what you're reading or what you're understanding of in terms of a shift in alliances. We have been talking on this panel. You were both articulating about Bahar Dar, Addis Ababa, Asmara axis, and at that time, actually, Mogadishu as well. We saw Mogadishu going out of this, but then the Bahar Dar, Asmara, Addis Ababa remained for some time. Are we seeing a change in that? And in the Oromia, Ethiopia peace negotiation or discussion, as they called it, and the Ethiopia Tigray negotiation going to change anything in terms of this power matrix? Faisal.
Yeah, I will come to that issue, but in terms of the peace process that we have seen, I like to recognize the fact that the Tigray conflict is somewhat different than the Oromo conflict. At the time, the two peace processes or discussions, as Eskial called it, in the case of Oromia started. I think when the peace process in Tigray started, the death rate and death toll was humongous and captured the attention of the world. And in general, peacemaking has many actors, including the warring factions as well as interlocutors, outside people coming to at least, enforce or coax the groups to sit down and talk peace. I think in the case of the Tigray Addis Ababa peace process, when it started, it didn't come right away to the resolution. If we recall, they started clandestine meetings where the government has been denying. Then the Djibouti came. Then a couple of times, people talked about where they met and how they met. And then the Pretoria came, and then the Nairobi came. So in general, peace process is multifaceted with multi-actors, with the conflict of itself mutating day after day. So when the Tigray negotiation really took shape, peacemaking took shape, the conflict was at its highest, where the world, as well as the two parties that were fighting, could no longer, absorb any more pressure. The economy of Ethiopia was at the doldrums. Abiy one time felt like he was losing his power when TDF forces came within 100 miles of Aret Kilo, and vice versa. The fortunes have changed against the TDF, and then the world came. So I think there were factors that really made the peace process in the case of Tigray to, first silence the guns, because the noise of the guns in the case of Tigray was huge and loud. No one could have ignored. As in the case of Oromia, the death is, taking place, but it hasn't captured, for whatever reason, the world's attention. And I think I would concur with the scale that what had transpired in Zanzibar was really touching basis. It was not substantive, but I think knowing the history of OLA and OLF for that matter, and this, almost 7-year struggle for self-determination, I expected the first thing that will put on the table by the OLA interlocutors would be self-determination. How the PP will, interpret that and how much of that they will take, that's another thing. But I don't expect this peace deal or peace process that just started to just die there. I think it will mutate, it will take shapes, it will take 2, 3, 4 more processes and meetings until we see the shell of that peacemaking taking place. So I'm hopeful that down the line it will happen. And I think there are factors, probably later on I will come as to why. I think unlike for instance the conflict between PP or Aret Kilo and the Amara region, there is a hidden well-wishing. Despite the conflict, there is a hidden acceptance of, a sort of coming together between Oromo forces that are fighting in Addis Ababa, the same that I observed early on with TDF or TPLF and, and Aret Kilo. I think we'll, wait for that to come, but there is that good spirit downline, which you don't have now with the Fano and Save Fano and Addis Ababa at this point in time because of strategic differences. I think, yeah, the Abiy's accusation of a neighboring country meddling in the Ethiopian crisis is none other than Eritrea. I mean, if we just make a guesswork, Abiy did not say so, so I want to make sure that I'm not saying Abiy said so. But I think if I just put one and one together, he is probably expressing his frustration with Eritrea arming and abating political forces that are now fighting against his administration. Yes, we talked some time ago that triangle, or if you will, axis of anti-TDF TPLF that started at the time, that was Gondar or Bahirdar, Addis Ababa, and Asmara. There was no long-term sustainable ideology that binded these three forces together. We said that and we knew that it was just a sort of like a temporary comfort zone, that this tactical issue was presented to each, and each one had a different goal. Farmacho was on the fringe, and I don't think he ever meshed in this scheme of the Addis, Bahirdar, and Asmara. I think now that is falling apart for several reasons. If Abiy wants to maintain a peace deal with Tigray and even with Ola and ONLF in the long run, he has to abandon Isaias. In the past, people recognized Isaias's conflict within the scheme of Ethiopia to be only Tigray and TPLF. I think in the last round of the conflict in the Horn, Isaias betrayed other groups beyond the TPLF. He betrayed OLF, he betrayed ONLF, he betrayed several national liberation movements that have had history with Eritrea for a long time. So Ola, as a major power and as a very significant player in the scheme of carrying Ethiopia from where it is to a new horizon, Isaias does not have that. And I don't think Oromo Liberation Front and Oromo Movement and Oromo Democratic Forces from now on will see Isaias as a friend. So now you have three groups that are sharing doubt on Asmara and Isaias. Aret Kilo, Makale, and Adama, hopefully in the future, if Ola becomes a partner with in peace with Addis Ababa. I think the future that we can look at is that the triangle has been shattered. I don't know if one linear relationship between Asmara and Bahir Dar would exist. And I don't think that has enough infrastructure to stay in power in motion for a long time for various reasons that we don't have to list now. But one reason that I say that's not sustainable is because, you know, a lot of the gurus in Ethiopia are committed. You can just push around here and there, but committed to the concept of multinational self-determination and federal system. And if Bahir Dar stands against that, and Aret Kilo is moving towards the multinational federation system, I don't think they stand a chance to create enough pressure on all these gurus. That may the relationship between Abiy and Asmara may deteriorate in the coming days if things go the way we like to go, which is implementation of the Pretoria deal, a very futuristic, peaceful mediation between Ola and Addis Ababa. And with that, I think my hunch is that Fano groups, which are really haphazardly organized and still searching for a cause celebre to fight for, would not stand a chance. And we have to wait for Asmara's reaction to Abiy's statement, not probably today or tomorrow, but Isaias will take his time to just come and probably hit hard as he sees fit and as he sees opportune time.
Thank you. Actually, immediately after that speech, Isaias made had as usual one of the longest, interviews, and some people again are referring what Isaias said there in terms of government, a buffet government or a bazaar. Actually, he used the word bazaar government, referring to Abiy. Again, like you said, we can only guess he's referring to Abiy in that interview. Scale on the same portion, how you see the regional factor. Actually, we're talking about Eritrea, but we have seen what's happening in Khartoum, and there are many people who say that both Ethiopia and Eritrea, or Asmara and Addis Ababa, are with Hamidit, and maybe there could be a spillover effect in terms of what's happening in Khartoum as well. But on that point of what's happening in Oromia, this is obviously, I think, maybe day before yesterday, talking about the negotiation in terms of the other Oromo political forces should be taking part in this. Pascal?
All right. On the issue of Abiy speaking in parables and riddles about Ethiopia's enemies, I don't know what to make of it. If Ethiopia is threatened by an external force, that an external force is meddling in Ethiopia's affairs, if he has evidence for that, he should make it a policy. He should make a policy to defend Ethiopia's interests. No foreign power or a neighboring country should meddle in Ethiopia's affairs. Is this a joke that he's playing a mind game with us, with Ethiopians? Who is meddling in Ethiopia affairs? Why is he not naming them? Why is he speaking in riddles? Why is it not a policy of Ethiopia to defend the country against external? Doesn't Ethiopia have a sovereign right to defend itself? Why is the Prime Minister of Ethiopia speaking in riddles? Why is that? Why is that necessary? Is it an Ethiopian way? This is an Ethiopian way of dealing with policy issues. Why is it letting all of us second guess if this is an existential issue for Ethiopia, that a neighboring country is meddling in affairs? That's a serious matter, and there has to be a policy to defend against external aggression, whether that is or overt. Having said that, you can guess. I'm sure that he's not saying that Sudan is, at this point in time, Sudan is meddling in Ethiopia's affairs. Sudan has enough problems on its own hands, much less interfere in Ethiopia's internal affairs. I'm sure it's not Kenya. Kenya has never had a policy of meddling in Ethiopian affairs. I'm sure it's not Somalia. I'm sure it's not Djibouti. I'm sure it's not Egypt. Who else is he talking about? That's where you're really zeroing in on Eritrea, and the Eritrean dictator also speaks in this intricate and elaborate Ethiopian or Eritrean way, speaking in parables, in riddles, not saying exactly what it means. So I really don't know what to make of why they are not naming the neighboring country. If you cannot name it, if you cannot say it, forget about it. So that's what I would say about this announcement of the mind game, the guessing game. Rather, if this is about shifting alliances within Ethiopia, it's only in Abiy's Ethiopia that you can kill 1 million people and then think that those people, just because you have stopped bombing them, just because you have stopped using your drones and bombing the hell out of them every single night and every single day, that they are your. But the way that he is acting is right now that Tigray and Abiy, the federal government, are on the same side against the destabilizers of Ethiopia, Eritrea being the Eritrean government being the prime suspect in this, but having also fifth columnist in the Amhara region. After genocide, after crimes of humanity and atrocity crimes that history, had seen throughout history, all practiced in one theater of war, for him to pretend that now political alliances have shifted and that he's going to rely on Tigray and maybe on Oromia to corner the Amhara. This is the kind of politics that is really tearing the country apart. This is the kind of politics that you can be with one group one day and you could be with another day. Yes, there are probably shifting alliances, but these are not stabilizing alliances. I could understand why Faisal would say that there is those who are supporting the multinational federation might come together, but these are also blood enemies at the same time. And I don't really think that Abiy has given up on his imperial ambitions. And maybe, especially looking at where I am in London, after seeing the ostentatious pageantry of coronation, I don't think he down and accept a multinational federation anymore. On the AFC, on the third issue that you asked me, Getachew, on the OFC, the Oromo Federalist Congress, I think what they're saying is that the political settlement that Oromia is seeking to resolve the conflict in it simply be between the OLA and the government. I think that's correct. When it comes to when it comes to ceasefire and cessation of hostilities, those who are armed and engaged in war should be the ones that should be sitting at the negotiating table to stop the fighting, to cause the guns to fall silent. But when it comes to, this is in particular in Oromia, when it comes to political settlement, whether that is in Oromia or anywhere, it should be all stakeholders, not only the ones that have picked up guns and started shooting at each other. The political settlement should be comprehensive. If the negotiations between the OLA and the Ethiopian government were to be concluded with a political settlement, then all political parties that have a stake must participate in it. On cessation of hostilities and on ceasefire, they could negotiate with OLA as it should be. But when it is about the future of Oromia, I think the political, the table of the negotiators must expand. And I would say the same about the rest of Ethiopia as well. That the Ethiopian government, the federal government, cannot simply have piecemeal Tigray, one peace process, with Oromia another, with Benishangul another, with Gambela another. That is not settle the national political problem that had led to a civil war everywhere. A negotiated settlement is needed, a political settlement, a new social contract is going to be needed. In that situation, you cannot leave the other stakeholders outside the negotiating table. So on that issue, the OFC demanding to be at the table regarding political settlement is a correct demand.
Okay, great. Faisal, I think you want to add something?
No, I think we do understand why Tigray accepted the peace deal, and that peace deal doesn't mean the Tigray pain has been forgotten. I think as we said so many times, it's a generational, it's a historical, it's a cultural changer as to what happened to the people of Tigray. It's a biblical happening, but it's one of a trajectory of history in Ethiopia that harmed different people at different times. I mean, the southern Ethiopia's feudalism that extended for over 100 years subjugated, humiliated, and debased entire generations. It's one thing when somebody kills you, it's another thing when somebody again debases you for hundreds of years. And I always laugh at when I hear people in their own bubble, coming especially from certain circles, and wonder, like, why do Oromos or Somalis feel angry? Simply because they cannot understand the debasement and the humiliation and the anger these people went. I think what the people of Tigray went through in the last 2 years, even if Ethiopia is democratized, even if the power that rests today in Arat Kilo is given to Tigray elites, it won't be a medicine to what had happened. So that is there, it's in the background. Abiy cannot undo what he has done. I take that as a given. What I do focus at this point in time, and I agree with Eskiel, is what does peace mean without democratization? What does peace mean without assurance that the focus in Tigray or in Oromia or in the Somali region in 2010, who also experienced a mini blockade for several months, what is their guarantee that Abiy or another guy will not do this to them? I think peacemaking should have an indie product that people can trust and people can say, we can nurse, we can slowly deal with the pains and problems that we have had. But from the beginning, when you play numbers with people who have been hurt, like what had happened with Tigray, during all the certificates given to people who were literally the architects of that genocide, along the same line, such as Getachew Reda, who said he is operating on borrowed time because he would have died or he have escaped death from narrow, escapes. When you put these people together without really sorting out the real issues, it's not a sustainable peace. The peace that we are now dealing with is just probably Scale touched it also, to silence the peace, the guns, to give people time to farm and probably feed the people who have been suffering under siege. I don't think Abiy has come to the realization as to what peace deal is and what peace means. Peace is reconciliation. Peace is also making sure that people have something to hang on to at least say it will take time to forget. Are we getting from this deal some of that? No. Actually, what we are seeing is not only in Addis Ababa, but also in the districts and in the regions like the Somali region, empowering some infantile kind of people who don't have any regard for the people. And I will tell you an example. As you all recall, there was a time when Abiy brought Mustafa Umar, the Somali regional president, to the podium and instructed him that the money he raises from the book that Abiy wrote will be used to build a monument for the fascist soldiers of the Derg who has slaughtered the elders, the pious religious figures, and the businessman on Jijiga. Yesterday, that's what we knew about a month and a half ago. Yesterday, Mustafa is standing in front of people in Jigjiga and telling them a different story without any explanation, that he's not going to build the monument that Abiy asked, but he will build soccer fields and youth centers with the money that he collects from the book. How can you really, as Skyl was saying, one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing? The people that are being killed in Qabri Dahar 10 days ago, as the Ethiopian soldiers vacated Mekelle and that area, Tigray and northern Ethiopia, and descended to Somali region. They just started their old mission and started killing civilians for small things that people did, like small demonstrations or gatherings. So on the one hand, we are talking about peacemaking. On the other hand, we are building dictators, mini dictators, as well as spoiling people's lives for no reason. So I think I agree with Scale that peacemaking should be from the heart. It should be serious. Daniel Kibret should never have stood at that podium. Never. I don't care what people say. Should never have been given a chance to stand next to Getachew Reda to also accept the same award that Getachew was given. I can understand what people like Getachew and Tadesse Warere and other Tigrinian leaders would accept the peace deal. I don't understand why Abiy will start humiliating people by putting the architects of genocide, people who call people of Tigray, cancer, right there and accepted. So I think we are still waiting for seriousness. I hope the peace deal that Abiy is suggesting with Ola, as Scale said, address the humiliations, the subjugation, the debasement, the historical need for the Oromo people, which is self-determination, that can give them the decision to be part of Ethiopia or not be part of Ethiopia. There is nothing that's sacrosanct for people to be killed in the state that claims to also be over them. There is nothing that forces the Somali person to be Ethiopian when Ethiopia has been killing them for over a century. I've prepared a little outline of the number of massacres and genocidal acts the Ethiopian state did to the Somalis, starting from the 1940s, by the way, at the same time the Wayane genocide in 1948 took place. Literally in every 10 years, Somalis were subjected to atrocities and massacre, all the way from 1929. It's about time that people take responsibility for their actions, especially when they carry out atrocity. And that responsibility should be both locally as well as at the international level. I don't think Abiy and team would ever escape from what they have done in Tigray. I don't know whether that judgment will come 20 years from now, 10 years from now, 5 years from now. We need the peace deal. We need to silence it against. We need to make sure that both Oromo region as well as Tigray region and others come to the table and talk about peace. But that doesn't mean absolving those people from the genocidal acts that they carry. that should also be pursued in the right mechanism.
Thank you, Faisal, for that. Talking about Daniel Kabrat, actually, UMD Media has compiled what Daniel was writing, the name of the day and the name of the night of that operation, where a number of times he was talking about Getachew and the others and the TDF, the Tigray people, and so on. So you have a point there. And in terms of scale, you are talking about Abiy's ambition for, what was happening yesterday in London and so on. One thing that people are fearing is as well, emboldened with what happened in Tigray and now in Oromia, uh, he might be going for, consolidating everything. And what what Faisal was mentioning about the federal forces would be undermined, to unprecedented level. And they are connecting this to the political, some people call it political assassination, that happened in Amhara region just a few days ago as well, and what has been happening over the years. So do you see the international community reading what's happening in terms of peace, war, operation, whatever it's called, reading it the right way, in terms of expecting a positive outcome out of all this? Or are they, again, from geopolitics perspective, from Sudan, Eritrea, and so on, this is the best that they can see in Ethiopia? Scale.
Actually, the international community, that amorphous body that has really no address. If we talk about the international community to mean the United States, they're also gloating over the fact that arm twisted the negotiators in Pretoria to stop the killing. They are content with shoring up Abiy in power. And Abiy himself has done a very good job of decimating any other alternative and making himself the only person who could hold the Ethiopian state by himself. Because the question that they raise is that if not him, who else would replace him? Well, allow him to use all kinds of forces, internal, external, logistics from outside, finance from outside, and to fight his own people and suppress political opposition to him. When all of that was being done, the international community did not raise a finger. That they bought this charade that he called that this is a law enforcement operation. That was the biggest war in the world at that time, the deadliest war in the world at that time. It's the longest siege a law enforcement operation, and the international community fell for that charade that this was a law enforcement operation. In Oromia today, what they're saying is, and people who understand the Oromo language could hear, the prime minister himself and the president of Oromia region in Nakamte, when they visited Nakamte, announcing the peace effort in Tanzania, they were talking about the operation. They're saying to the people of Walaga, they were saying that your problem is your own children. Tell your own children to give up their guns, come home, and do whatever. If that happens, development is going to happen. Some project money is going to flow to the region. So they're blaming the people after conducting several rounds of war against the people and forcing young men and women into the bush. They're now blaming the people. They're saying they were going to hold their law enforcement operation. Well, the international community should know that this is not an international law enforcement operation. This is the use of the military to obliterate the political opposition. So now that he is the only one that is standing tall, now the Tigrayans cannot be trusted with federal power. Now the Oromos, half of them at least, cannot be trusted with federal power. And his supporters, his the urban politicians who support his centralization and unitarization of the state are talking about the next prime minister who would be from the Somali region. Now he has made himself an indispensable person, and the national community had bought, and that they're going to start to shore him up because there is no alternative to Abiy Ahmed. Let me say this, and I've said this on this forum before. There is a difference between the government of Abiy Ahmed and the Ethiopian state, and there should be a difference. Just because the prime minister is changed, it doesn't mean that there should be a change of government, that you could replace this insane guy with some people who have rationality in their head. The problem in Ethiopia is not political. The problem in Ethiopia, and I've said this many, many times, the problem in Ethiopia emanates from Arat Kilo and the person who occupies the chair of the prime minister. He is the problem. He is not the solution. He is not the only candidate to salvage Ethiopia. He is the problem. To change him, just one person, doesn't mean to change the entire structure of the PP. Prime ministers who have run the state to the ground, prime ministers who have run the economy to the ground, those kinds of prime ministers should not remain in office for one day. So he has made himself indispensable, and the international community is now rallying to support him. So the international community is not discharging its responsibility, of at least responsibility to protect. I don't think they're going to do anything about him.
Okay, thank you, Zgel. Faisal, I think you have been also talking and sharing your insight on the US specifically on what it can and it cannot do, or willing to do and is not willing to do. You can also touch on that. But one thing that back in 2021, you wrote this article. It was, I think, in October on the path forward as that, the war disintegration or a peaceful transition. So in the international community, specifically the US, working maybe behind the scene for such transition, or is it what, like we are concluding the show, it's just business as usual with Abiy emboldened more than ever before, or maybe before the war?
Yeah, thank you. I think there was a time the US was thinking of a transition, as Gail repeated, probably transition from the current prime minister to a potential change. And I think that has, we passed that. That's no longer, at least, in the back of their mind, they understand, the West understands how we wrecked the boat. I think Alex Diwal captured that spirit very well when he said that Abiy inherited a functioning government, but he destroyed with the aim of trying to create or recreate an empire, something like that. He literally inherited a good state with good functioning economy and more or less a unified, at least from the political point of view, country and system, and he wrecked that. That's the time they were thinking of some sort of replacement, Abiy. But I think now they changed it. And the way the West thinks when it comes to peace negotiation and peace is they try to really perfect it into a science by borrowing from natural science. And most of the people who study for the US and the West peacemaking are empirical political scientists who really try to put numbers into the situations that we are dealing, more of a quantitative as opposed to qualitative. So at this point in time, they see the entire country of Ethiopia as transitioning from one that was on the brink of disintegration, as was stipulated by a discussion held by 5 U.S. ambassadors, former ambassadors to Addis Ababa at the United States Institute for Peace, chaired by what's his name? I think Shin was there. 5 of them were there, and the thinking was, and this is 2019, Ethiopia could easily disintegrate in the same scenario that we have seen with Yugoslavia. I think for whatever reason, that is in the background now, but not imminent. In the background, I say, I think, as Iskiel was saying, Ethiopia's problem, in my opinion, is not only Abiy. Abiy is the immediate problem, the current problem. But Ethiopia's issue is a structural problem. It has not gotten itself to a full-blown state formation where everybody believes that this is their country and this is the state that they like to work with. That's why probably Scale was articulating the political program of Ola and OLF, where potential full liberation from Ethiopia is still in the books. That's also the case for Somalis, for Sidamas, for even Afar, who has been close with the Arat Kilo. So I think the issue, structural, will always haunt Ethiopia. But at this particular juncture, there's a thinking at the State Department that we passed that. They see the problem is the peace negotiation in Tigray was a huge, huge turnaround for the West, to say that we really went over the big hump, that there is no more, attention grabbing, death and rape, and because the West usually reacts to this, and the rest could be working. And I think the way they see now, in my opinion, with the start of the Ola and Abiy's team negotiation, is the West is very well aware of the fact that this negotiation will take 2, 3, 4 times around, because they look at peace negotiation as Abiy saying, I want all the way this, and saying he's willing to accept 10% of the demands from Ola. Ola will also come and say, we accept nothing less than 90% of its demand. They know that. Then they know that these 2 lines that intersect, that each one push the other, will slowly narrow, come down, and they will get to a point where 30% is where they disagree, and that 30% can work it around. They apply that kind of science to peacemaking. So still we are not in the woods, but I think I think I'm not seeing the current peace talks that started in Oromia to fail. I think it probably will succeed uh, for various reasons, as I said, that within the Oromo leadership on both sides, there may be some opportunities that they are working together. Opportunities in the sense that, both of them feel like, the Ethiopian state can be reformed, that the old system can be renegated. I don't see Abiy as the main factor, in my opinion. I think some people can forget Abiy. Some of us may not be able to forget Abiy's role, but I think as TDF and Tigray leadership put the Abiy factor aside and started working on the bigger piece of peacemaking, I think that could also be possible, a scenario for the Oromo situation. Other than that, I think there's a huge responsibility on Oromo elite and Oromo leadership on both sides, whether they are PP or Ola or OFC, in the sense that Oromo makes the majority of the country. As I always argued, Oromia sits in the belly of the country. Where Oromia goes, so goes Ethiopia. I think making peace deal within the Oromo factions, in my opinion, is a priority for the stabilization of Ethiopia. I think that should take precedent on both sides. The Abiy factor could be a secondary. I don't think it should be a primary, although I do understand that his megalomaniac attitude of grabbing power and the fact that he doesn't see democratization of Ethiopia as a necessary issue. Even with that, the coming of the Oromo groups together and seeking a second time of transition, whether that transition center is Abiy or not, is another thing. But that opportunity is there. there are challenges, but the opportunity for the fact that some Oromo groups can talk together, bring together all the functions, probably establish a transition government within Oromia state, get rid of some of the current challenges such as Shimalis Abdisa, in my opinion, and then probably using that opportunity as a way to prepare for election 3 years from now with multinational groups is probably something we can work around.
Great, thank you. We are finishing with the final thoughts. Before that, I just want to share with our viewers that what's happening in Tigray, because there is a very urgent issue in terms of the raining season starting soon. The IDPs who are, sheltered in schools, because there is this challenge of starting the schools now. And what we see on the screen is over 181,000 IDPs sheltered in 71 schools, out of which 23 are high schools, 42 primary schools, and 6 colleges. So these are in different parts of Tigray, and they cannot move them because Western Tigray is still not under the Magala government. Europe, Northern Tigray in Kunama area and Rama area is still where the Eritrean forces are still occupying. So there is this urgent need to resettle them, but still, based on the Pretoria agreement or settlement, this hasn't been done. So this is something that we are hearing. And then today we heard that 16 people after the Pretoria agreement died of hunger in southern Tigray, in Samre area. So with this in mind, there are people who are asking, okay, the guns are silenced, but the micromanaged siege continues. Actually, Mulgita Gabrahewot wrote this article this week in terms of micromanaged siege and so on. So I just want to throw that, before we end the show. Eskel, final thoughts of the day.
Well, the final thought is that I'm going back to the square one. Look, everyone needs peace. We don't want the blood letting to flow, to continue. No one wants that. But reality is the reality. The negotiators in Pretoria were on a short leash. The person that was negotiating in Pretoria were not the people at the table in Pretoria. It was Abiy himself with the phone. They're all on a short leash. They always call him. He is the one that instructs. There is no institutional autonomy in Ethiopia. The foreign ministry doesn't know what he is doing about negotiations. The foreign minister himself doesn't know a damn thing about what is going on with the negotiations, with the negotiators. The military people are there simply because they have stars on their shoulders. The generals are there. They know nothing about the politics or about the security situation. He has them on a short leash. He had them on a short leash, all of the negotiators in Tanzania. He is the one that negotiates. It's not that they are delegated to negotiate on behalf of the Ethiopian state. He's not letting them do that. If the institutions function in Ethiopia, we can hope that some sane minds in the institutions, in the bureaucracy, the able people could see what is coming and then negotiate for the country. That's not what is happening in the country. That's not what's going on in the country. He is the one that makes every decision. He's the one that makes, that assigns bloggers, social media trolls. He is the one that cares about all of this. So that is what I'm saying. He is the one that is problem, and you can't set that aside. And state, he is the state right now. Nothing else is functioning without his knowledge. The people who could see the larger picture and consequences, and you could imagine what would come. Well, They may be in the bureaucracy, but they're not acting on their own thinking. That's not what is happening. So that is why I am always pessimistic about the Ethiopian people making sense of the impending catastrophe and then pull back. That I haven't seen. What I'm seeing in Oromia is not a tendency to negotiate. If there is a tendency to negotiate, why is it that he has brought about um, divisions from Tigray and settled them across Abai on the northern shores of the Abai River, so that they can cross to Wallagga? Why is it that all of his forces are concentrated in the Shawar region if he is really preparing for negotiations? To be honest, the issue in Ethiopia could be settled in just a split second. To ask for self-determination is to ask for democratic rights that is enshrined in the Ethiopian constitution. Why are we denying anybody in Ethiopia their constitutional rights? Why? Why is that? Why is it a problem to accept that all nations must be equal in Ethiopia? Why is that a matter of negotiations? The Oromo people demand for equality, for self-rule, for social justice, and for economic justice is not too much to ask. Why is blood being spilled to simply address basic human needs, fundamental human questions about self-rule, like justice? Why is that even a problem? It's only in Ethiopia that it should be a problem. But if they really wanted, the Ethiopian government, EP government wanted to resolve this thing, they could do it according to the constitution. They could agree on that principle. But that's the problem, that they're not even agreeing to what the Oromo people are entitled to constitutionally. And that, I think, of course, people in the Somali region know that even better than any others. It could be resolved if there is goodwill, but there is no goodwill in Ethiopia.
Thank you, Skel. Our viewers actually, Skel, where Skel is now is past 1 a.m. after midnight. So I thank you for thanking for that. Faisal, final thoughts, but there is a repeated question. We don't normally pick questions, but it's relevant to the topic. So John Jackson is asking, can we get a political update on Somali Kulin? From Faisal to Faisal, there are rumors of Mustafa being removed. And your final thoughts with that as well.
Yeah. Well, that we hear all along. I think every meeting that the PP organizes and Abiy chairs, the number one person that he humiliates in front of everybody is Mustafa Omar. He has on the record to say that Mustafa administration is the most corrupt system that Ethiopia has. He has been accused of selling the fuel that is intended to be used for Somali region, being passed over to Somaliland in Hargeisa, where it's sold at a cheaper rate, and then people buy from there to bring it back to Jijiga and other places to use. The rumor is there. The stature of Mustafa Umar is at its lowest point, to be honest with you. He has been deserted. Recently, he tried to reshuffle the cabinet, but he couldn't move a finger because he realized that even his own cabinet members are opposing him. But again, Abiy is the one who wants him to be there until that system is falling apart. It looks like he has sown such a division among Somalis that the unity that Somalis in that region used to have when it comes to Addis Ababa has been shattered since he has been there. He is just a political novice who never really listens to what the public say. But in the past, he spent so much energy and resources and wealth to sustain the propaganda machines of some of the radical elements in Amhara regions, including pumping money to the Fano leadership, whom he invited to Jijiga and hosted them at a very higher level. And Somalis are starving. So yes, what you are hearing is what I'm hearing. How deep that is within the PP and Abiy's circle, I don't know. But I think the sooner they remove him, the better this group, this region which has sustained its peace, not because of him, but because of the fact that Somalis have seen enough bloodshed, both during EPRDF, during Derg, and during Haile Selassie, as adults got together and said, war should be their last resort. So we hear that. I think as a last comment, my comment to just add, I think I agree with Scale 100% that what we see in Abiy is an autocrat who also is a theocrat. Both he believes in the theory of autocratic ruler, but meshed and mixed it with theocracy. For instance, he believes that by killing millions of people on one day, the next day he can ask them to pray, and that will disappear. And the hurt and the pain would disappear. As he said, enough to war, welcome to peace. And they will go to Tigray, they did, and they will cry with the people who have been raped and who have been maligned and who have been destroyed, and whom he himself said that he will take them back 100 years, which he did to a certain extent. And he believes nonchalant that can go away. No, it doesn't go away. I think the only way this can be remedied is that we have to use the blight of the people of Tigray the same way the Western culture uses the blight of the Jews. Never ever again, not only to Tigray people, but to all groups. I do see some people, Getachew, who belittle what had happened in Tigray. The very forces that were calling for genocide 2 years and a year ago, today want to put that whole issue as a debate and both sidism kind of thing. You hear all these debates where now they want to equate that or what happened in Tigray with what's happening now in this limited capacity in Fano area and what have you. I think all those are deniers of the conflict. They denied the Tigray genocide. They will also go ahead and deny the Oromo atrocities, which could in any day become genocide. And we don't want to even deny what's happening to the people of Amara. Let me just say this. In the last few, since the Tigray peace has been signed, I have seen two dominant debates, both of them coming from dark sides of the community, the Ethiopian community. One is, as I said, they want to really explain away the entire Tigray situation, and that's wrong. Leave this issue to the people of Tigray to deal with it in the best way that they know when it comes to their pains. With politics, we can all talk about and how to move. That's one. Since people resisted and did not welcome the peace process in Tigray in some circles, because they don't like that, there is such an animosity now in the last few weeks that I have seen with Oromo and anti-Oromo, equating all Oromos with Abiy. Just explaining in the most cynical way what they call Oromima or the Oromo nation or the Oromo people, in a way that they really want to paint as Oromo's condition and Oromo question is not even a merit-based question. And those are I talked about this quite often, Getachew, in this forum. Usually atrocities and massacres are preceded by narratives that prepare the ground for hating groups, for also carrying in massacre. I think what I see now in some circles against what they say about the Oromo nationalism, Oromo question is being, sort of like not worth of the question that they are asking. All those are narratives that are preparing the ground for another anti-Oromo kind of thing. And I think we have to be careful. We have to watch it. As we watched the Tigray, as I told you, 2018, I wrote an article where I said what I was seeing at that time when everybody, the very groups who are now trying to do the same thing with the Oromo question, were the ones who were clapping for Abiy, their hand is to carry a narrative that prepared for the Tigray genocide. The same groups are doing the same thing against Oromia and the Oromo question. And we need to be very vigilant, circumvent, and watch out before this thing takes shape again. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Faisal. And this ends our show today. And hopefully We'll continue next week as well, and we have covered a lot within this time. Good night from here, Gail, and good evening, Faisal, from here. Thank you. Bye. So we have been you have been following us live on UMD Media's YouTube channel. This will be also aired on the satellite under Horn Broadcasting Services to the Horn of Africa. So those who are following us on HBS, we broadcast in English, the H panel and other interviews in Amharic and in Tigrinya. So we'll be having another show tomorrow in Tigrinya. Follow us live, and it will be also on satellite under HBS. Good night from here. Bye.